This is The Close-Up. Conversations about creativity. From our studios in Los Angeles, here is Jim Chabin.
Corey Turner is here. He serves as Senior Vice President of Post Production for Paramount Pictures in Hollywood. His team has worked on an incredible list of blockbuster hits, including Michael Bay's Transformers, J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, and Brad Pitt's World War Z. His previous work can be seen in the hits Alice in Wonderland, Men in Black, and many, many more. We've wanted him here for some time. Corey, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
How many shots are in a movie like a Transformers, roughly?
2,500 shots, roughly, maybe slightly more. But that's the 2D movie. So for the 3D movie, you have to multiply that times 2, right? Because,
left eye, right eye.
Correct. which amplifies the complexity quite a bit. You know, the VFX on a movie like that are hard enough in 2D. And Michael is a director who demands the best of every team and everyone that works for him.
Here's what's coming out in the next 2 months. The Walk from Robert Zemeckis, right. Martian from Ridley Scott, Heart of the Sea from Ron Howard, and Star Wars from J.J. Abrams. Right. Ron Howard is really someone who's not immersed in the 3D, but Ridley Scott, Zemeckis, and Abrams are. Yeah. And so now you've got master craftsmen. Right. This isn't their first rodeo. No. They are all wanting to make something that they've achieved what they've not achieved before. How is it that we're at a point now for this holiday season, for that rolling into the holiday season, 3D is now being used as a dramatic language.
It's being used to alter the experience of seeing those movies. Each one of those titles you mentioned, I can guarantee you that the 2D movie and the 3D movie will be a completely different experience. You can't tell me that The Walk, shot to look like it's on top of the World Trade Center is not going to look different and be a different experience in 2D versus 3D. I was working with Zemeckis on, I think it was Beowulf when he was, in the early discussions of, just within his office on doing that movie. I remember hearing those discussions, so I'm extremely excited to see that. JJ doing Star Wars. I mean, come on, it's J.J. Abrams first of all, and two, it's Star Wars,
right.
And it's Star Wars in 3D from the conception, not something where they came back into it later. Martian is shot. It's probably one of the only ones shot coming out in the near future of this magnitude, shot in 3D. That's gonna it too will have its own look and feel to it. Those are three very different experiences.
If someone says, I want to learn about 3D done well, what movies would you tell someone to go back and look at?
I thought the technical execution of Prometheus was really well.
Ridley Scott.
I think the complexity of that movie is really, really hard. And I think it was extremely well executed. I think Gravity was done really, really well. It's one of those films where you can tell they thought about it throughout the process. Hands down, they did a great job on that.
You work with people like Michael Bay, J.J. Abrams, Tim Burton, Mark Foster. You and your career is, and your legacy in the film business is pretty significant. When you're around great directors and you see they all have different styles, but is there something in common that they have that you admire, that you say, these people are great what?
It's first, each one of them great, and each one of them actually very different. The one thing they have in common is they are all striving to tell the best story possible. I don't really think they're striving to make the best sort of big blockbuster movie per se. I think each one of them is truly just trying to tell the best story that they can for their specific movie. JJ, I loved working with JJ. JJ, I learned so much from that experience. I would show JJ shots, and JJ is so awesome in the way he critiques shots that when he hates it, he still compliments the shot and then guides you in a direction to believing that you are actually then repitching what he really wants in the first place. When we finished Star Trek, I sent him a mail and I just said, I learned so many things, but one of them was just the way he communicates with his teams, it was absolutely fabulous. You walk away at the end of the day, you could have shown him the worst thing, that he's seen throughout the entire show, and he would compliment at least the effort that went into putting that together. And I thought that was an excellent quality that I tried to remember and
Keep
incorporate.
the team motivated.
Keep the team motivated, but also acknowledge the work that went into it,
Yeah.
even if it wasn't right for what he wanted.
Yeah, I think what you did and what the team did on Star Trek, as someone who grew up with it and thought I'd seen it all, to go back and completely re-thrilled again with Into Darkness and think this is like seeing Star Trek for the first time. Every part of it was fun. There is an expectation on some of your movies. You have Transformers, you have Star Trek, you have, in the case of Paramount, Mission Impossible. These are film franchises where the expectations of the audience are huge.
Correct.
So when you enter a project like this,
You lose a lot of sleep.
because you've got to make a movie that hadn't been made before that's going to exceed what's come before it.
Everyone wants the next one to be as good as the first, if not better. That's a very hard thing to do, especially with sequels and the tentpoles. You're right; they have to be bigger. They have to be better.
Early on in the process, when the studios were first introducing 3D, there was an enormous concern, I think, by the industry of saying, "Look, we don't want things flying off the screen. We don't want to make people dizzy. Let's make it shallow. Let's give it character, but let's be very judicious of how we introduce 3D to these audiences." Are they? I saw Gravity. I see movies and say this seems much more aggressive use in 3D than 5 or 6 years ago. So are they allowing you to put your foot on the gas a little bit when you're doing?
One of the reasons why I came to Paramount, one of the reasons why I love being at Paramount, our executives, when I initially came in, Adam Goodman, now Mark Evans, Stephanie Ito, Stephanie Allen, all of them we all work together extremely close with our production team to make sure we're putting out the best product we can. When it comes to 3D, there has always been a sense of, if we're going to do 3D, let's give the audience what they want.
Their money's worth.
Every filmmaker I've ever worked with, all of them, have started at the beginning of the show and said, I want it really shallow, I want it subtle, I don't want to give anyone a headache, I don't want to push things too much. I will use Barry Sonnenfeld, who I love Barry. Barry is awesome. We had a great experience doing Men in Black. At the beginning, everybody said very subtle. Knowing this, I had 2 versions of shots that I never told Barry existed. The subtle version and then the version that I actually wanted to do. As we slowly got into the production process, Barry became more familiar with the technology, became more familiar with the storytelling abilities of it. Said, I want more, I want more. It got to a point where I was actually pulling Barry back, saying, well, we can't go further for that shot, and here's why, and we would have a discussion about it. That is a wonderful place to be. Those types of discussions have to happen, because now it's a filmmaker's storytelling tool. Tim Burton at the beginning of Alice, they want it shallow, very subtle. Let's just, we don't want to give anyone a headache. Same process, a little bit into it, we want more. I've experienced that on every show, and it's a learning tool. Listen, you have a director who has a lot of responsibility on their shoulder, and then you take a tool that they haven't used before, they have to learn it, they have to figure it out. It's a good approach. You just have to have a team that understands that they're under that type of pressure and helps to educate them and move it along. At the end of all those shows, they were all literally at the end of every show I've done, the director has always said, I want more. Darren Aronofsky on Noah, I want it shallow. I don't want to distract from the story. I just want to keep it simple. Midway in, we're screening shots, and he's like, oh, this is great. I want more. I want more. And it turned out to be a great experience, and Darren was awesome.
So it's a learning experience that you're building an environment, you're helping an environment, facilitate an environment where a conversation and a creative discussion can go on.
Correct.
Familiar with the benefits of using 3D in this scene or at this point to tell the story and advance the emotion. And now they're getting comfortable with it. Box Office Mojo, 12 of the top 20 all-time movies now are 3D.
Correct.
It'll be 8 of the top 10 this year are 3D. So
and audiences are craving more. And we found a way to really have sort of these intricate 3D moments that are, if they were in any other movie, could be that cliche moment. But since it's so tied into story on that movie, it works perfectly.
So for a movie like Paranormal, are you given part of that experience is startling the, so if everybody's saying I want this subtle and soft and I don't want to upset anybody, a Paranormal's whole goal, people go to see that movie to say, okay, I'm ready for you.
And we come out the gate on the 3D movie
me.
Swinging. We literally come out the gate swinging. The moments that we are putting in there are so tied in a story that we can have these large, expansive 3D moments through the film to help enhance the scares, to help enhance the emotion. In certain cases, it pays off to a scare. In certain cases, we just use it as a distraction so that the audience doesn't know when the scare is coming.
You're going to get this movie done. You're going to catch your breath because 2016 is a huge year for Paramount.
Yeah.
You have Star Trek. You have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Work will be underway on the next Transformers.
Correct.
So what would you expect? And it'll be interesting to see Star Trek because the unfortunate thing for anybody involved in Star Wars is that the expectations could not be higher. Everybody wants to love this movie and get excited about it. JJ will not direct, as I understand it, Star Trek, but he will produce. He'll be very involved with it.
It's still about robot production.
So all of this experience will flow through. What do you expect from those movies next year? What are you excited about?
Star Trek, I think, just building on the previous movie is going to be great. Creatively, there's a lot of opportunities to expand on what was done in the previous Star Trek, knowing that the audience now is familiar with seeing these environments in 3D. The last Star Trek was the first time anyone had seen the Enterprise in 3D. It was the first time anyone had sort of experienced those storylines in 3D. Now there's an opportunity to expand on that and take advantage of more just moments to make it more fun. The last Star Trek, one of the best sort of comments that I read about the film was someone saying they didn't know, they knew they had to duck from time to time, but they just didn't know how often they had to duck. They were on the edge of their seat because they felt like there was going to be particles or embers hitting them at all times. I thought that was a great comment. We'll have an opportunity in this next Star Trek to just build on that. Same thing with Transformers. It's Michael Bay. It always has to be better. It always has to be bigger. And Michael will definitely make it clear as to what he's expecting us to do in the next film. Michael is the creative genius behind those films.
Every time we have a technological advancement in storytelling and film, 3D being the most recent, but high dynamic range, high frame rate, laser projection coming, now the creative community and the studios are evaluating virtual reality of saying, okay, it's another platform for us to explore creatively how to tell a story. When you look at virtual reality, what kind of potential do you see in it? And we've all read articles saying, I can put you in a forest, or I can put you on a street corner in London. Well, that's great for 3 or 4 minutes.
Sure.
But after you've seen so many buses go by, you're saying, okay, where does this take me? How do I get transported? So how do you look at it?
I agree. I think that VR is an excellent new experience that users can have. They can transport themselves into all these different environments, as you said. I agree. That's a 2 to 3 minute thing, and then they're like, okay, well, I'm ready to transport myself to the beach or go on to something else. I think that for VR, there needs to be some more development on making it at least cinematic, or making it a scenario where it's not just experience-based, but it's cinematic in nature. We need to start tying in stories. We need to start moving the camera around and figure out what that's going to be like. Everyone says, well, people are going to get sick. Well, that's what they said about 3D too. They said, well, you can't, there are shots in Transformers or shots in all our movies where people, if I would have shown those shots 10 years ago or 5 years ago, you can't do that. People are going to get sick and ill. That's the same type of talk that you currently hear about VR. I think, I would love for someone to grab a VR camera and go racing up and down the freeway, or have some type of cinematic storytelling, action sequence. And let's just see what happens, see what it feels like. There are going to be, as anything else, some users who are going to like it and some who don't. But ultimately, if you can make it cinematic and tie it into a story, you create a balance of all the different types of experiences. And it will be the makeup of all those experiences that creates a story, that drives a story, and also keeps the user in that scenario, in that experience for the duration, versus just a 2-minute click and look around at what could be a magnificent coastline or something, tied into a story. And I think that's the development that has to happen. I know that there's a lot of talented people out there looking at that, and I can't.
We got to figure it out.
Yeah, we have to figure it out. Ultimately, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's something that will grow. I think that until we figure out how to make it cinematic, it will slow down just a bit. But once there are proven successful cinematic experiences, I think VR will definitely be a big thing.
What makes a good creative working for Corey Turner?
You have to be flexible. You have to be ready to shift gears in a completely different direction on the drop of a dime, drop of a hat, without sort of taking it personal, just to understand that, we work with directors who are used to getting what they want, and they want it now. And in their defense, they have a big task on their plate, and they need to know if it's going to work or not. And sometimes you have to switch gears and switch strategies to make that work. My teams, I am extremely grateful to my teams. I'm fortunate to have the ability to put a separate team on all of my shows, so I can make sure each show is getting the absolute best crew that possible for that specific show. We dedicate a lot of attention to those shows, but it also means that we're involved in a lot of the decision making that goes into the filmmaking process. We work seamlessly with our visual effects teams, with our editorials, with our production teams, so that we're all in sync.
You're describing individuals not necessarily saying, I expect to see these 3 things on your resume, but more, I'm trying to find someone that I can teach and bring along who's going to be able to stay up with me and that I can rely on because I've got a director relying on me.
Correct.
Not to disappoint.
I balance my teams between senior experience and entry-level experience, because I think you have to have that makeup. I rely on my senior level people to keep us on track big picture wise. And I rely on them to delegate to the less senior people, so those people can learn and eventually, hopefully one day, take over that senior level spot when my senior level person moves on to their next big thing. I had recently, I won't say lost a producer to another company that was great for us, but she moved on to something even better. So I was extremely proud of that moment. But what happened out of that scenario is I was able to now give someone who had less experience the chance to be able to prove themselves, which is how I learned.
At what point did you know that this is the game you wanted to be in, and did you have any idea that you'd end up at the level and having the responsibility that you do?
I will say I had no idea I would end up at this level, and I'm still learning and pushing to do even better. But I started really early. I was 15, maybe 16 years old, I believe 15. I can name the person's name is Bob Thomas. Bob is now general manager of a TV station in DC.
What was the job?
He gave me an internship. I applied for the internship. Bob brought me in, and I remember thinking, this is great. I've got a production internship at JCPenney, the clothing store. They had their internal communications department, and at that time they were doing work for internal clients, which would be their stores, along with external clients like commercials and TV shows. And he brought me in as an intern. And my first day, I'm thinking, this is great. I'm going to be doing camera work, and I'm going to learn editing, and I'm going to do all this cool stuff. And my first day in, Bob says, see that closet full of boxes? They're full of business cards. Enter them all into FileMaker Pro. And I was like, oh, this is not what I expected. But what now looking back, what he's just teaching me is just how things have to start being organized and figuring out ways to with that task, to start managing information. I get it now.
And doing what you're asked to do, and without complaint.
Yeah, without
right?
complaint. And it
Right.
was a horrible task,
Right.
but we did it. I knocked it out. It took about 2 weeks, and then after that, it was like, okay, come downstairs to the production studio and we'll start teaching you stuff.
Right.
They moved me into another department at that time, and it was an internship, so I got to bounce around a bit and kind of figure out what I wanted to do. At that time, they had received a digital camera. It was 2 megapixel. It was massive. It sat on this 200-pound monopole, and they were shooting the first ever digitally produced catalog. It was for Harley Davidson, and I got to work as a photography assistant on it. I thought this was great, but it's way too slow. And so I used to pass by the visual effects teams every day, and I'd see them not working but playing this flight simulator, and I thought, geez, these guys have the best job. They just play video games all day long. And the manager's name was Carl Johnson, a dear friend. He actually just passed last year. Carl brought me in, and they started teaching me visual effects, and I knew at that time that this is what I want to do.
Someone says, my niece is graduating from the University of Texas or something and wants to work in the entertainment industry. Would you take the time to talk to him?
Sure.
And because of what you and I share in common, which is if it hadn't been for someone who looked at a very thin resume from the Midwest and said, okay, I'm hiring you, but you're going to learn. What do you tell them? I mean,
The first thing I tell them is go back to school and pick something else.
Yeah, okay. Become a dentist.
Because you'll get more vacation time. No, I tell them, look, this is an industry where going to school definitely helps. I always recommend that. However, it's also an industry where you have to get in, you have to get your hands dirty, you have to learn, and it's ever evolving. It's something that you're always constantly learning. There are always new tools, there's a new way of doing things, but there's also reminding yourself to stay true to the storytelling aspects, which have stayed the same as from decades past. But you have to figure out how to do it in the new tool sets. You have to figure out how to do it more efficiently. You have to figure out how to do it faster. And on top of that, the one thing that I think most people don't talk about is it's never just one person. People will come to me and say, you did great on this show. And I say, no, I didn't do great. That's a team. Like, I'm nothing without my team. So you have to be able to function in a team. I, going into every scenario, identify my weaknesses first. I know what departments I'm weak in versus which ones I'm strong in. So I supplement my teams with people who are stronger in my weaknesses. So I tell people, find something, be really, really, really good at that. Find a task, be really good at that. Know the other task. Know them, because at some time you're going to have to use that skill set too. I remember thinking, high school geometry, like, when am I ever going to use this stuff? Like, and now I remind my other teams, like, visual effects in 3D it's all geometry. Like, that's pretty much all it is. So find something, be really good at it, balance yourself with other skill sets, and be ready to work within a team so that you can put your spin in, you can put your word in, and have the confidence to know that that's your specialty, that's what you know.
In a social media world, with LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and all of these things, and the traditional HR departments of a studio being overwhelmed with probably hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes, how would you recommend a young person who, when people call me, I say, where are you? And they'll say, Tennessee. And I'll say, finish your school, but then you got to move to LA. If you want to get wet, you need to drop in the swimming pool. And if you're going to be in entertainment, it has to be either here or New York, right? So
or Vancouver.
Or increasingly Vancouver. So someone who's trying to figure out how to become noticed, what do you say? What are good ways to be noticed?
I think everyone has to figure out that creative way to get noticed. I personally, I'm pretty aggressive with sort of stating to whoever is the party of interest, hey, look, I want to work on this. I may not be the best choice right now, but I will learn it, and eventually I will be the best choice. And guide me on that path. You got to find someone who's willing to help walk you through that, to introduce you to people. You have to network. It's not enough to just say, I graduated from this school and here are my grades. You gotta network a little bit. You have to be able to put yourself in situations where pulling someone in, I'm not solely going off this resume, but I can call another person and say, hey, look, I know this person hasn't done this task before, but tell me about their character.
Right.
Are they a hard worker?
Right.
Are they willing to learn? In your experience, what have you seen? And so how you carry yourself, how you present yourself, that plays a huge role as well. For someone moving in from out of state, it's very difficult. But I think you can always pick up the phone, call a studio, and ask their HR departments, hey, look, I'm looking for guidance on how to get into X department or X thing. They will always be willing to help do that. I think the majority of people just assume that you can't do that when you can. You can reach out, you can send an email. Maybe they don't answer today, but eventually you'll get something back. I personally, I would email every day if I have to. I mean, be aggressive. I know a story, I won't say who this person is, but they wrote a specific director a letter years ago saying how she was going to one day, run this director's studio, their production house for them. It turns out years later, she's now working for that director. And that letter that she hand wrote years ago is actually in his office. That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
So she was aggressive. She knew what she wanted to do. She knew that all she had to do was just keep poking at the right people, keep her name there, show some interest, be aggressive, and she made it in there. And she's awesome at her job.
Well, where did you go to grade school? Name that school name.
So I went to high school in Texas, Plano East High School.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would close by saying you've come a long way from Plano East and, for me, Hutchinson High, to be sitting at this table at this point in our careers. And in your case, it wasn't an accident. Promise that you'll come back once Star Trek gets started and tell us more about what your new year looks like.
Sure, I will definitely come back and talk more.
Thank
I don't
you
know
so
if I can tell you
much.
about Star Trek at that time, but we'll talk about something.
We'll find something to talk about. Thank you, Corey Turner.
Thank you.
The Close-Up is produced by the Advanced Imaging Society in Hollywood and powered by Barco.